Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hello and welcome to The Money Factor. I'm Richard Naylor, your host. Our topic today is the 401k, and our guest is John Shartrand. He's Chief Investment Officer for Capcom Federal Credit Union. I'm very happy to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me, Richard. Appreciate it.
401ks, something that I missed through all these shows that we have done on investments, and yet today the climate is such that people are very worried about Social Security and their future. So it seemed like this was something that needed to be remedied. I'm very glad to have you.
Yeah, no question. The pressure on individuals to save for their own retirement has never been greater.
Before we get into the 401k, though, let's give me a little background on Capcom and what brought you there.
Sure. Well, a lot of people, a lot of viewers from Colonie may know, because Capcom Federal Credit Union was created in 1953. And we were created by members, for our members, and that's the mantra, is to benefit our members every day. So we've been a big part of the community since '53, and as Chief Investment Officer, I handle the investment management, retirement, and estate planning side of the business. And that component's been around for close to 25 years. And we were created just for this reason. We saw the writing on the wall and said, you know what, people are going to need to face this retirement question sooner rather than later. So as a credit union, to meet our members' needs, we created Capcom Financial Services to meet that need.
It's certainly a vital part of our life, and
no question about it.
One that we would like to help people work with a lot more so that they have a good future. 401ks, what are they?
Yeah, 401ks, they were actually created in 1978, and it's literally in the Internal Revenue Code, Section 401k.
So their name came right from the
the code.
Okay.
And it was created in '78 really as a supplemental retirement plan to what we were talking about to support what we'd call traditional retirement plans.
And what is that? I guess we might as well.
Well, you know, the show today is about 401ks, but as far as planning, tools, and retirement, '78, they're relatively in their infancy. Before that, and I was in the business in the mid-'80s and in the '70s, people actually had what we would call a three-legged stool for retirement. You'd have three core retirement sources.
And I haven't heard that in a long time.
It's been a while. People don't talk about it anymore. They talk about 401ks. You know, well, how's your 401k? And you had pension plans, and you had Social Security, and you had your own savings. And those were the three legs that you built over your lifetime. On pension plans, there are two basic kinds. They're what they call a defined benefit and a defined contribution. Most people are familiar with a defined benefit. And if you think about it in this area, General Electric, New York Telephone, you know, the old Niagara Mohawk, New York State employees, they used to have defined benefit plans. And what that was is you worked for a company for 30 years, and when you left, you got a monthly check based on your salary and years of service. A defined contribution is just that. It doesn't define what you'll get when you retire. It defines how much will go into that retirement plan for you each year.
How much do I contribute out of my paycheck?
Yeah, or the company puts in for you.
Oh,
so it's a defined contribution. It's just going to define what goes in that bucket for you, and what performance, what investment returns, and how much goes in will determine how big your retirement pot is, if you will.
Okay.
So what's happened is we've migrated away from defined benefits and migrated towards defined contribution. And specifically, a subset of those defined contributions are 401k plans. So it requires a greater individual accountability and responsibility for us to accumulate money in our 401k. So when you combine that with the pressure on Social Security, because Social Security, there are less people working to support the people in retirement. And Social Security is now taxable. It's imperative that we save as much as we can on our own personal savings, and why this show makes a lot of sense, and it's great that you're doing it, Richard, is 401ks become an integral part of anyone's financial retirement plan.
And I think the common man, if we can find him, would know two things. He would know an IRA and he would know a 401k, because we hear them in everyday speech all the time.
Certainly.
How do we compare and contrast those two vehicles?
Yeah, well, let's first talk about an IRA, because things have changed for IRAs, since the 80s and into 97. An IRA is an individual retirement account, so it is what it says it is. It's for individuals to set up. A 401k is employer-sponsored. It's company-driven. IRAs used to be one traditional IRA. You put dollars into the account and you'd get a tax deduction off your return. So if you put $1 away, 20% in taxes, you'd save that 20 cents right off your taxes. In 1997, the government created a second type of IRA. So you've got IRAs, you've got a traditional, which you used to be able to make tax-deductible contributions, accumulate the money, and then at age 59 and a half, which is normally when you can get access to it without any penalties, that money would then, you'd have to pay the tax on that, on those earnings, and your money you put in. They created the Roth in 97, and it works kind of strike that, reverse it, just the opposite of a traditional
Pay
IRA.
my taxes up front.
Pay them up front, so if you want to save $1, you got to make like $1.20 to make the dollar. But the money grows in there, no taxes, the pot builds up, and then when you pull it out, no taxes at all.
And that, of course, has a nice appeal if you think, okay,
It really
I've got
does.
this money and it's totally mine. I can use it any way I want.
Got that nice spot in
No
Florida.
taxes.
You got that condo you'd like to buy in Florida, and I need money. John, hey, geez, I need to,
And they're cheap right now.
You could pull it from the Roth and not have to pay taxes on that
Okay.
distribution. Whereas if you pulled it from an IRA, you'd have to pay taxes on those dollars.
Okay.
Now, if you compare that to a 401k, individual retirement arrangements, IRAs, 401k is employer-sponsored. And the big advantage of the 401k over an IRA is the amount of money you're allowed to put in. IRAs, you can do $5,000, up to $6,000 if you're over age 50, but 401ks, you can put as much as $16,500 if you're under age 50, and
that's a huge difference.
Yeah,
If you're looking-
$22,000 if you're over age 50. So if you're
yeah.
looking to shelter money, that is clearly the way to go.
And that's great for catch-up also.
Certainly, yeah. Hopefully we've got people planning enough here, through this show, the Money Factor and through Capcom, that we're educating them enough so they're not too surprised when they're age 50. But it's great to know you can put more away.
We all get there, and so that's
Yeah,
the important thing.
That's right.
Now, do a lot of companies, I think a lot of companies have already set them up. Is that correct?
Yes. I believe there's probably 47, last count, 47 million participants, probably 423,000 plans, and about $2 trillion in assets.
Now, is that participants of individuals who invest, or?
That's correct.
Okay.
47 million participants.
Which is
400.
about, we're over 300 million population, so.
Yes.
But so there's a long way to go.
Well, yes and no, because there's only so many people in the workforce at one given time. And to give you some context, we know 401ks were created in 1978. You got to think in terms of in 1978 there were zero participants.
So that is a huge.
That's a huge jump. Yeah. To give you the context, defined benefit plans, there was probably about 31 million participants back in 1978. That's down to 21 million.
Wow.
And total defined contributions plans, there was something like 21 million, and they're down to 8 million. So you can really see, and why this is a relevant topic, and I can see why you wanted to talk about it, for individuals to know how a 401k can help them, plan for retirement.
Now, there's also something about matching.
Yeah. So let's talk, 401k is, we were talking about the differences between a 401k and an IRA. And then the two types of IRAs, traditional and Roth. So what happens is inside a 401k, that's usually employer-sponsored, right? So an individual account is yours and you set that up.
And you can set that up anytime.
And you can do that.
Easy.
So to answer your question, individual retirement accounts aren't going to be eligible for matches. That's something you'd set up on your own. But these 401ks and what you're talking about, up to this point, we've only talked about as a 401k as a little container where you can save money in a tax-favored way. My dollar, no tax, a full dollar goes in your bucket, so you have more for yourself when you're retired. But 401ks have other ways where employers can add additional funds to your bucket. And the two of them are what they call a match, some employers provide, not all of them, and also a profit sharing component, which is depending on how well the company does. They give you a flexibility of the percentage they can put in a bucket.
Okay, so that really helps them out, trying to avoid saying, well, we're having a really bad year, we're going to have to not put anything in. Well, this is already understood in the beginning, so everybody's working towards...
Everyone, as a rule, most employers want happy employees. And next to health insurance, retirement plans are probably the next most important attribute for people working.
Right.
So we certainly want to be able to set up a 401k so people can shelter money for their retirement and reach those higher limits. Second, you want to provide a match because maybe that is an incentive to save more, or they're not saving enough to make sure they get that full match component. And then the third component is profit sharing, where they allow you to put an extra percentage based on overall performance. So when you talk about 401ks, there's your money and the employer's money to build that pot.
Now, how do you look at that from the employer's point of view? Why would they put money into a 401k for an employee? Why not just give them a little higher salary?
Yeah, so we know there's tax advantages, so that's probably the top reason.
Right.
But attract and retain employees. We've talked about the evolution and this tremendous growth in 401k plans, and that means popularity. So that means other employers have them. So if you want to attract and retain your employees and keep them happy, you're going to want to make sure your 401k is competitive.
And so I learned a new word, and I guess now we can throw that out, vested.
Sure.
We know if you're in the New York State pension system what that means. You've worked a number of years.
Right.
What does it mean in terms of a 401k?
It means the same thing. So if we imagine a 401k as a bucket of money, and in that bucket you have your money, and in that bucket you could potentially have the employer's money through a match of your contributions or that profit sharing component. Now you've got this bucket that's growing, your dollar, 50 cents, 50% match, you could have $1.50, and if there's another 5% thrown in as a profit sharing component, your dollar just grew automatically, $1.55. So what happens is that money then becomes, yours is always yours. But the employer, where you work, that money is subject to a vesting schedule, just like if you worked with the state. You have to be there X amount of years to gain 100% of those dollars if you were to leave.
That would encourage a company to do it because they wouldn't feel that, well, if I'm investing in people and there's this huge turnover, I'm a software company,
Yes.
What are they going to remember me for?
2 years later, you leave and you take the employer's match or the profit sharing. So there's usually like a 5 or 7 year period of time, and there's various ways to do that, whether it's a declining percentage or what they call a cliff, where it's the same amount and then all of a sudden you're 100% vested. So
those sounds like really good reasons to maximize whatever you can in terms of a 401k.
Yeah, our bias, Richard, if you're sitting down with someone, is you always look at what you have through your employer to see if we can maximize that before we turn our heads to the individual retirement arrangements.
Okay. It's just such a good deal.
It is, and we talk a lot about the challenges in retirement planning nowadays as we migrate from defined benefit to a 401k type plan.
And an overpopulation.
And an overpopulation, the challenges with Social Security. But one of the nice advantages today with the 401k is that portability, that it is your bucket of money.
So if you leave the company, you take it with you. How do you take it with you?
Well, there's a lot of ways. I'll start with the worst way, and what a lot of people do is they just take their money.
It sounds like they just gave up.
Yeah, you don't want to do that because think about that for a second. If the government's giving you a tax break to save in this vehicle and you take your money before certain rules, and 401ks have age limits, or before you can pull it out, or age minimums, and it's 59 and a half. So if you left your employer before 59 and a half, not only will you have to incur the tax that was due that you never paid when you put the money in, but you also have to pay an additional 10% penalty.
So there's a big cost. It's as bad as credit card interest.
It is. So forget jeopardizing your future retirement. The government also penalizes you to do
So
that.
what are your positive options?
Yeah, so first of all, you hope you catch them before they do that. Then the other option is some companies allow you to keep it there, not all of them, and there's certain rules where if it's over $1 amount or under $1 amount, they'll force you to take it.
Okay.
And then because it's portable, you could almost carry it to your new employer and say, here, take my 401k and could you put it in
So it's probably
yours?
a form that's sent, or
you'd be able to do
give the information to the new company?
That's correct.
Or, okay.
Yeah, you'd be able to do a direct transfer or direct rollover.
Seems ideal.
It does. A lot of people do that. A lot of people also set up those individual retirement accounts they have.
So you can go that way also?
You can, and still preserve that tax benefit.
So even though you put more money every year in the
That's right.
401k,
it's open for rollovers.
you can take it all and
They're
put it
not
in.
subject to the limits.
Great.
Yeah, the contribution limits. And we see that quite a bit. We do a lot of that in our firm. Because the amount of jobs that people change today is a lot different than 20 years ago. It's not uncommon to have 5 or 6 different jobs.
And you really need to think that ahead. Right?
Yeah, you want to consolidate as much as possible for the ease of it, to reduce expenses.
Now, we've looked at it so far as a bucket. Of course,
it doesn't go into a void.
Not exactly a bucket, and there has to be investment vehicles. How do you think about it in terms of, do companies offer you 1 or 2 options? Is it typical to offer you several different ways to invest your money?
There are fiduciary responsibilities where you have to offer many options and diverse options. So you're going into this container and you have like a menu of choices. We're going out to dinner Saturday night, and you get the appetizers, you get the different, the main dishes, the dessert. You're going to have those same choices within a 401k. And they're traditionally broken down into what I would call cash, bonds, and stocks.
Okay.
And each of those have a different level of risk, or a different amount of volatility they have. I used to use an analogy of a tree branch. The closer that you are to the trunk, cash, the less volatility when things get a little dicey, right?
Nice.
Gets a little, and then the further out you go, a bond, you get a little fluctuation, but not quite as much, and then the stocks, the
And
further
I've seen
out.
those birds flying around in the wind.
Yeah, yes, and we've all experienced over the last 2 years how volatile things can be, no matter where you are in that branch.
Right.
So the key component to when you get your menu of investment choices, if you're not working with a professional, a lot of plans will have what they call asset allocation models. And really what they're doing is they're taking your money and splitting that up like a pie into different slices. So you have a certain amount in cash, a certain amount in bonds, and a certain amount in stock.
And do you get to control that typically, or is that?
You can control it on your own, but if you're not working with a professional, I'd recommend using an asset allocation model.
Okay.
So what will happen is these money managers will kind of create for you a pre-made model.
Based on age, or?
Yeah.
Possibly?
It'll be based on risk.
Okay.
They do have what I'll call targeted funds, which aren't, a lot of people talk about them, but they're not used a lot. They really haven't taken off. What's really taken off are these asset allocation models, which it's not defined by your age, it's defined by the mix of stocks, bonds, and cash. So as an example, the most conservative might have only 20% in stock, maybe
Okay.
80% in cash and bonds. And the most aggressive model over here might be 90% stock and 10% cash or bonds. So now you've got this place on the branch where you've got relatively conservative and then further out relative aggressive. The reason, and the question you asked about age-based funds, and they were called targeted funds, if I'm going to retire X.
If I'm already 58.
If I'm 58, you're going to be closer to that branch, so your targeted fund would be, 2015. So that makeup would dictate dictate to you that you're going to have less stocks, more bonds, and cash. And it was a great concept on paper, but because everyone's individual risk is different, it doesn't always work. So the model can be more specific and it'll be defined by risk, and then you would define that, not by your age, but how much risk you're willing to take.
I think a lot of us, we also look at the risk benefit. So when inflation is low and we're seeing interest rates that are so small on cash, it's hard to be as conservative as perhaps somebody would advise us to be.
Yeah, that's why I always tell them to focus on, the investment component's an important part, but the ability to save and maximize the amount you're saving is probably the most important, because that's something you can control. We've talked about 401ks and the advantage of the portability of that if you change jobs, but another great advantage of a 401k, if you stop and think about it, you're investing money, and where you choose to be on that branch or how much risk you have, that money goes in every paycheck.
Okay, yeah, that's important to go into that, right?
Yeah. So what makes that nice about it is you're not just investing one time and then taking the ride with that investment. You're actually accumulating an investment during the up times and during the down times, or up markets and down markets, right?
Right, so that dollar cost averaging type of mentality.
So for our viewers, when we talk about dollar cost averaging, you're averaging the price automatically. When you invest a fixed dollar amount, when the price is higher, you're going to buy fewer shares at that higher price. And when the price is lower, like it was in 08 and 09, you come roaring back because you bought them at the very bottom. What I love about that, most of all, it takes the human nature out of it. Because as humans, we don't like to lose money.
Right, I'm very risk averse.
So our tendency would be, oh my God, it's going down. I'm just going to stop everything. I'm not going to put money away.
I've already lost too much.
Yeah, I've lost too much. And that's absolutely the worst time to stop saving, especially in a vehicle where you can accumulate over time. Just to give you a good example, to exaggerate the point, in a perfect world, you would want almost your plan to always be dipping during the accumulation phase and really not start pumping up until your last 5 years.
Right. So don't be so happy that it's so high right
That's
now.
right. By the if you happen to be like someone I know around 58, it might be good to see it start peaking now. The closer you get to
Just
retirement.
to make you feel better.
It feels good. But the younger crews, 20, 30, that younger age group, it's okay. Volatility, I like to say, is our friend during accumulation period. Volatility is our enemy during retirement. And at our firm at Capcom, we help people with both. We help them accumulate money, which we're talking about today. But to be honest with you, Richard, the biggest challenge going forward is, what do I do when I'm in retirement, now that I have my pot of money? And it takes a whole different set of expertise and knowledge to help people transition that.
Right. Do I draw down my principal, and if so, how much?
That's a whole nother show.
Right.
But that's the big challenge.
That's the big question.
And we've really focused on that because we saw the writing on the wall. We figured there's going to be consolidation. There's going to be more individual accountability. So how do you help people, human nature as it is, volatility in markets as it is, how do we help them manage that risk and manage that pot of money?
Control their emotions as much as possible.
And that doesn't work. So we just try to manage it. I tell people, be mad at me, not yourself.
Well, that's good.
So take your anger out on us. That's all right.
I want to touch on two more things. We're getting close to being out of time.
Okay.
One is, I was looking for books. I was, I'm a librarian, I confess.
Yeah.
Trying to find out what books are there out there on 401ks. And about 25% of them right now talk about how to rebuild your 401k. What's the concept there?
Well, first of all, knowledge and reading and understanding it's imperative. I do find that the headlines or the titles of books are really dictated by the time period we're in. So they're really just leveraging the fact that people saw an unprecedented drop in value.
2008 was not a good year.
Well, to give you some context, the S&P 500 on March 9th hit 667. It was up as high as $1,500. So picture that. And now convert that into dollar amounts.
It's
if you had
just
100,
devastating.
you know, if you, yeah.
It's 1929 scenario over again.
And you're going through that, you know, and this is where human, well, there's actually a study called for, it's called behavioral finance, and there's books on that, which I would recommend the viewers read that because it gets into what people's risk tolerance are.
And to try to understand yourself.
The better you understand yourself and how you handle yourself, maybe you can put things in place to protect you against yourself for your retirement plan.
I want to get into a little bit of the technical part, dip
Sure.
back into it again.
No problem.
If you're a company or if you're an individual and
Yes.
you're watching the show and you don't have a 401k, but you're interested in having one. Now, what if your company does not have one? Or what if you are a company and want to set up one? What do you do?
Well, one of the things that you find, you know, whether it's books that now have titles, Rebuilding Your 401k, How to Get Your Assets Back Up, because they're so popular, companies respond to that. So there are a lot of what I call turnkey programs, where you can call them and they'll do the administration, make sure you meet all your requirements through ERISA, and they'll also help you with the investment management. So maybe when they first started in 1978 in the 80s, it was a little more difficult, but now in the year 2011, there are a lot of companies where you can get 2 or 3 to give you kind of a bid on how much it would cost based on the number of them. And it's, yeah,
Okay.
it's really a turnkey
Anything that
program.
people should look for when they go shopping for a 401k? Because it seems like
Well, choices are good. My bias, because I do this for a living, is always talk to a professional. Know what you know, and make sure you hire the experts for the rest. But the key is a plan that fits for you. Like with the real, the engine of our economy, these small business owners. A lot of times it's a tax deductible question. Meaning they get to a point where if you're self-employed and I can do $5,000 in an IRA, it almost gets to a point if it's just them or a few employees where it makes sense if they can go from deducting $5,000 off their taxes to potentially $16,500 or $22,000 and even more with a match and profit sharing. So imagine that difference and the tax savings on being able to shelter $30,000 versus $5,000. Well, that tax savings, it might be motivation enough to provide a plan for 1 or 2 employees.
Excellent.
And still get a tax benefit for you and your family. So
Now, what do you say to an employee who has access already to a 401k and isn't using it?
yeah, I go to their house, we pick them up, we bring them to the HR person, and we sign them up.
Yeah, it's that important.
I mean, the one thing.
do it.
The one thing you got to take away from this show is, we got to take our heads out of the sand and say, you know what? It is about us as individuals preparing. So let's take advantage of all.
Because it is going to be us who's there.
Right? It's going to be up to us to provide for ourselves in retirement. So instead of fighting it, you want to take advantage of all the tools available to you today.
Now, John, if somebody wants to reach you, how would they do
sure.
that?
They can call the credit union at 458-2195, and if they have a general banking question, through the credit union, a home loan or things like that. If they have the investment question, they can dial us directly at 782-0209.
And you're also located right off Wolf Road.
Well, it's kind of neat being here in the Colonie Library and talking to you, Richard, because the credit union, not only did I research here to get my job at the credit union, I've been here, for 16 years, but also we've been in the community since 1953.
I think we've seen you around also.
So that's great. It's great stability for the viewers, good information, and we really enjoy working with you and the Colonie Library in the town of Colonie.
Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
And I want to thank you for watching. I hope you have some great takeaways from today's show, that you maximize your 401k, and that you have a great week. Take care.
Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.